Today we're going over boiled linseed oil and how to apply that to your smoker. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, and today we're going over step by step what it looks like to use boiled linseed oil. This has caught a lot of attention of the barbecue community recently, and I just want to go over the process of converting your old smoker, restoring it, and what does linseed oil actually do? Because I'm very used to just grabbing canola spray and spraying up the smoker. So I want to show you kind of the difference of what we're looking at here. Jumping right into it, the process of applying linseed oil, this is what it looked like. For this smoker, when I did the main compartment here, I actually had a fire going, and I was trying to help heat up the pit with a fire. Now, when I was just doing the firebox, you want to do that first because you don't want a fire going, smoke's getting all over, and you're trying to spray linseed oil, apply linseed oil. It gets very hard. But starting here, you still, even with the fire going, you have to get this to 400 degrees. So you want to go in sections, all right? You don't want to try to get this whole thing at 400 degrees all at once. So right here, I was doing this section and around the corner here, but you just go, you get this going really hot and you go all over. And it took about 4 to 5 minutes with it really hot to get the whole, area going. Once that's done and you have it, so radar gun telling you what temperature it was. I was literally going like this and then checking my temperature to see where I stood. Once that is at 400 degrees or higher, then I would slap on gloves. You can use a sponge or a rag. I actually preferred the rag. Now here's where it gets crazy. This does start to burn and catch on fire. It's this really subtle, slow burn because this is 400 degrees. Your rag is going against it, and that linseed oil really starts to catch. So sponges too. I like this better. A lot of people like the sponges better, but you just put on the linseed oil, 400 degrees, and then you just run it across, back and forth. So you make this really nice coat. All right, and it bakes in as that temperature is at 400 degrees. It's baking in. It really looks nice. As you can see with some of the other photos, it's really done a nice job of making the smoker look top notch. The gloves, you would have to be prepared to go through some of these gloves. They would actually melt, so you have to be very careful. At the end, I was actually putting my hand in here, doubling up, and the rags and the sponges were still getting really, really hot. So it is quite the process, but you want to just do it in sections. You apply it, and let me show you the firebox and where it gets a little tricky. Here's where the process gets a little tricky. It's not tricky, it's probably where you want to start. So when you have a fire going and you're trying to apply oil, it's not bad on the side, but when you're trying to apply it here, you got the smoke and you got the flames coming up, even with the door shut. You just have a ton of heat coming and hitting you. So it's better to start here, just use the torch. Once you've finished doing your firebox and everything close to it, that's when you can throw some logs in there, keep that torch going, and get the fire going. The other challenge with the firebox, this is an insulated firebox. It gets super hot. So far, the sides are showing to be perfect with the linseed application, but this area here gets so hot. I was hitting the gun on it. It gets to 550, 600 all the time. So this section here burns off the oil really quickly, which leads to a problem. I'll try to get a close up here, but you can see we are getting rust already, even after the application. Now, when I applied the linseed oil here, within the first cook, this just looked like not steel, but it looked like it burnt off, was starting to develop some soot up here, but it was just so hot. What I'm doing to try to prevent this, because if you see a Smoky Meadow, or a Meadow Creek, I always call it Smoky Meadow. If you see a Meadow Creek on Facebook for sale, you will see that all their fireboxes are all super rusted out. And if you watch my last video, I showed you the process of removing that rust and trying to get it back to the raw steel and starting fresh. But what I'm doing is, after I've done my cook, this is cooling down, I'll check the temp, and as soon as it starts to get around 400, I'm eyeballing it. I'm guessing it's around 400, it's no longer around 500 or 600. But if you want to take your gun out, take your gun out, get a gauge. Once it starts cooling off and the cook is finishing, I'm hitting it with just a spray. I'm not using the linseed oil. I'm just grabbing the spray and I'm just trying to give it that barrier for in between cooks. So when it's raining or anything like that, I'm preventing the rust from happening. Because after my first application and it had burned off, I was starting to see these rust specks throughout the area here. And I'm seeing a little right now, but after the cook, I'm trying to do this to help. Here's another area. This is the warming box. All right, so you keep food in there, obviously, warming box. The firebox gets so hot right here that no matter what oil you put in there, it's going to burn off and then start to rust up because there's a lot of, this is where I store the grinders, obviously, keep them out of the rain. Don't start your firebox up while you still have grinders in there. There's your disclosure for the day. Cheers. All right, so obviously you can see that rain can still get in this firebox, come on down and get moisture and water. So I'm kind of doing the same thing, not every time, but when the cook is cooling down, I'm gonna hit it with some spray oil just to try to help and give it some protection. Now, following up from the last video I did, the rust removal, this was the side that we used the rust off gel. As you can see, it doesn't look as good as the side we used the grinder and sandblaster on. So my thought was, if you're gonna do it once, do it right the first time. Looking back on it now, I wish I'd spent the extra 30 minutes using the sandblaster. But at the same time, this is a big old pit. It's supposed to get used. It's supposed to get beaten up a little bit. Just applying the oil, did we really need the sandblasting? I think it does help make that extra touch, so I do recommend it. But make sure before you do any sandblasting, check out my last video on this and what it actually took to do some sandblasting. Last little areas of concern. Obviously, you couldn't really get a grinder or sandblaster in there, so I did the best I could, and then I hit it with the spray. I couldn't get my hand back there with the linseed, so I just used canola spray, and I want to always have a spray bottle ready and handy so I can just hit with a lot of extra oil throughout my cooks, at the end of my cooks, just to keep this baby going. But that's what we have. That's what I think. It's badass. I don't know what to say. I'm still a little bit shocked how damn good this thing looks. Awesome sauce, right? All right, wrapping this up. I'm just gonna show you a couple before and after pictures. I really like this process. I hated the, what the heck was it? Sandblasting. I hated the sandblasting. That was the worst. But I'm glad I went through all the steps, taking a full Saturday to, sandblast in the morning. Then I guess I did the linseed oil Sunday morning because of sandblasting and bending over a lot. I took it out of me. Anyway, the boiled linseed, I would say, is a hit. I'm going to show you a couple close-ups of where it hit raw metal, where when I was using the sandblaster, it took off some of the paint. But you can see if you're ordering a new smoker and you're going with the raw look, I could absolutely see how awesome just the linseed oil would look on raw steel versus high temp paint, because the high temp paint expands. It's not that it can't take the heat, the metal is expanding and contracting, and that is causing it to flake off and then create rust spots. So if I was ordering a brand new smoker, I would probably go with the raw look and go with the linseed oil look, because I think on the raw metal, which I'll show you here in a second, it just looks phenomenal. Okay, next steps with the Meadow Creek in the next video is I'm going to be playing with the Firebox. It is an insulated Firebox. Like I was alluding to, it gets super hot. And I think that's why when you see these smokers on Facebook Marketplace, why you see the Firebox rusted out so bad is because we all want to use big wood splits. So that is going to be the next video, is I'm going to be using regular wood splits versus tinier cut down wood splits. See what type of temperatures we're getting, what type of smoke we're getting, and what's the best way to run this Firebox. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I'll see you real soon.